this computer. Good evening. It is almost 6 o'clock. It will be in a minute. Wednesday, January 20th, week 3. This is Anatomy and Physiology, 6NAX, MED210. And what is due this evening, as of right now, is Task 2, Discussion 2, and the Lesson 2 case. And what are we doing this week? Let's click on Task 3. Let's try that again. There you go. And we're going to now talk about specific immune system and immune responses. We're also going to briefly touch on autoimmune diseases. And that was what we talked about before, like the friendly fire, when, if you recall Anatomy and Physiology 1, your glycoprotein code of all your cells is like a jacket, identifying who you are, if you're a good guy or a bad guy. Now, if your body's immune system can't recognize that jacket, it causes autoimmune diseases, auto meaning self, so you're attacking yourself. We're also going to discuss the effects of the immune system regarding short and long-term stress, and that's important now because we're going into almost a year worth of new and different stressors because of the pandemic. And that's why, wearing your mask, keeping 6 feet away, all well and good. But if we understand how your immune system works, you have to understand how your immune system responds to stress. And and remember what we always talked about before, clinically, you always have to look at your patient holistically. Meaning, as a whole, like all the different parts. For example, if your patient's stressed out and worried about the hospital bill, they're not going to get better, or they're going to take much longer to get better. So we're also going to talk about chemical messenger system of your body, which is the endocrine system. So what are the structures? How does this chemical signaling work? And how do these chemicals have specificity? How does the chemical know? Like I mentioned probably in other lectures, I used to marvel at the fact that when I was a kid, maybe like 6th or 7th grade, I used to always find it interesting, like when you take a pill, how does the pill know to go to where it hurts? Like if you have a headache and you take Tylenol, like how does the pill know where exactly to go? And we're going to talk about that as well, and also talk about this chemical signaling called hormones. Okay. Now we're not going to do the endocrine physiology lab, but you could click on this. Like always, the Carolina, we have a partnership with Carolina Biological. They supply all of our our dead body parts, for dissection. And there's lovely, if you look here, there's lovely quick notes in here regarding, endocrine system and all the things we talked about. So it's like an extra set of notes that will back up your textbook. So the 3 big things: stress response, how your immune system responds to stress, and the structures and functions of the endocrine system. So that's what we're doing today. And of course, concept map. It's your weekly task. So task 3 is due next week, week 4. And please look at the comments that I made on some of your concept maps. Some of you, most of you had some really nice ones, but there are some that, you might need a little work on, and that I'm telling you right now that other professors may not give you credit for, especially if you're not technically savvy on how to use Microsoft Word. And there are also free online, these little online programs that can help you also make a nice concept map as well. Give me a call, and then we could do a session where I could show you how to do that, okay? Because it makes it look neater. And if you are gonna do it on like paper and pen, pick non-lined paper, use a ruler, make it, and just make it neat, because you got to get used to doing these. this won't be the last time you'll see a concept map. You'll see it all along the course of your career. Heck, I'm in graduate school and they still ask me to do concept maps. So let's look at these two videos, and they're going to also going to talk about fight or flight, and I'm gonna lecture about that in a minute. But let's watch this video first, and then I'm gonna be taking some notes on the side, and then after the video. So let's make this a little exercise. You take some notes on how you would look at the video if you haven't done so already, and then I'll do the same, and then we can compare notes on what I find important and what you find important. Okay, so let's begin. All right, this.
We now understand that there's a complex biochemical link between stress, the immune system, and illness. When we're stressed, the brain causes the release of chemicals which go through the bloodstream and activate the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, in turn, give the body a shot of some very potent hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. Both give us a boost of energy, highly useful for survival. But when the stress is continuous and unremitting, cortisol continues to be released into the bloodstream. One of the side effects of cortisol is to suppress the activity of our immune system, leaving us vulnerable to infection and disease. Lower the stress, and you lower the risk of infection.
Okay, so share screen, desktop, click through. Oopsies. Okay, so let's look at what my notes would look like. And you'll see something interesting because it's going to look like a concept map. So we saw that and we know that. Let me make this a lot bigger. You know that stressors, it's not a fun thing, but it's just a fact of life. All right. Now, what that will do, and I put like a plus sign. This is how I use little shorthand. Plus means means always activation. So your adrenal gland. So your adrenal gland, adrenal, that's the little gland that's above your kidneys. So that's the adrenal gland. It's going to release a hormone called adrenaline. Now, adrenaline in the it's called adrenaline, and it makes sense. Adrenal, right? Right. So it's from the adrenal glands. Adrenaline is in the United Kingdom and in Europe, but here in the United States, you might know it as epinephrine. Okay. So what would that do? That helps your body release energy. And that makes sense, right? I need energy. So like if I'm stressed out, if something's putting me in danger, I'm going to need energy really, really fast. So, and it's also the reason why, you know, when, is anyone on this call like into, what do you call that? Roller coasters or anything like that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very much afraid of heights, but the thing about me is I love being scared. So I hope COVID doesn't affect Halloween, because I love going to one of those, you know, those haunted houses and, you know, Field of Screams in Baltimore. Me and my family always go there because I love that feeling of panic and that feeling of adrenaline and epinephrine. I am jump qualified. That means in my youth, I used to jump out of airplanes in a former life, right? Called my youth. And I don't like heights. I don't like being scared. But to be honest with you, I had a dream about it the other night. I miss that feeling. You know, that feeling, your palms get sweaty. You got that lump in your throat. It's kind of like an Eminem song, right? And you release that energy. And what happens after you ride the roller coaster? Don't you feel high? Like, don't you feel like you're on fire and you start laughing and sometimes you even cry? Oh, that's another thing. I cry on rides because why? I'm releasing all that energy, right? And it's so cathartic. And catharsis, if any of you do yoga or working out, you know when you burn and you move, you release energy, you feel what? You feel great, right? So stress in the short term. So let's label this. This is acute in the short term. So that's good. It's fun, right? Now, what happens like with this whole pandemic and financial stressors? You got to wear your mask and all these things, and you don't want to get sick, right? Like me and my daughter just got back from the gym, and my daughter she sometimes gets exertional asthma, and everybody in the whole joint is looking at her like, "Oh, COVID baby," right? Well, stress, chronic, if the stress is too much and it's over a prolonged period of time, the adrenal gland will of course have adrenaline slash epinephrine to release energy in the short term. But over a long period of time, the adrenal gland will release cortisol. And chronic means ick, pertaining to what? Crohn, time, right? So the cortisol, then what will it do? It will, oops, minus sign, which is it will deactivate your immune system. And you guys probably heard it before, those of you who had me in Anatomy Physiology 1. Everyone keeps on saying, oh, look out, February and March is the flu season because, the weather. Then why do people in Florida get sick? Why do people in Southern Texas get sick around the same time? Because, hello, everybody, when did you get your bill from December? End of January, right? What's coming in February? Taxes. So all those stressors, what happens? That's not just one day of stress, that's weeks and weeks of stress. The adrenal gland releases cortisol, it diminishes your immune system, and then what happens? You're gonna get sick, right? You're gonna get that little cough, you're gonna get that twinge in their throat. Why do you think a lot of people at week 5 get sick? Midterms, week 10, they get sick. Finals, right? It's we see it every term when we do our attendance reports. It's classic. So when we're looking at these two situations, that's why acute stress and working out and maybe doing something that's a little bit not dangerous but a little bit exciting, like what does my family do in the winters? We love going like snow tubing, and I'm finally going to teach the kids are old enough to learn how to ski and snowboard. I'm going to try to teach my family, and my wife is from a tropical island, so she's never been skiing before. We're going to try that out. And any of you who have ever tried skiing or ice skating or anything, it's a little bit stress, right? But it's fun stress and it's acute. It happens really briefly, but we all know the bad stress, like worrying about your mortgage, worrying about your kids. That's the thing that a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists will concentrate on, because we all know in the medical game that it causes immune system problems. That's why now hospitals, we always have to look at their patient holistically. I always look at what's the psychological state of my patient, like, are they happy? Are they sad? What's going on? What's going on with them, right? So let's look at that. It goes, remember that when you're thinking about your patient, also remember that when things get a little rough, and that's why now they're just as focused. The Department of Health is just as focused on the mental state of the country and in the world, and they're just as focused as that as in social distancing and mask protocols, because you got to keep the spirits up. At Inova, they have these online social things now, because many of the staff members are online or they're separated from each other because even when you're in a hospital, you kind of like be social with people. But now with the distancing protocols and all that, so they set up like online stuff, and they're having like an online disco and all these things. And if you've never attended an online party, please do so. It's fun as heck. I just DJ'd Sunday night. I DJ'd a 50th birthday party online, and it was fun. And it went from like 7 p.m. to 1, and everybody. And it's really interesting how some people just watch and enjoy, and other people they're just dancing in their room by themselves on a webcam. And whatever you pick, you gotta. We all live in a chronic world, and especially the job that you chose is kind of chronically stressful. So you gotta have your things in place, like workouts, times with your family, alone time. Those of us who have children, oh, isn't alone time so awesome? So usually Tuesday days are my alone time. I go to work on Tuesdays, but I stay there a couple extra hours just so I can have some peace of mind. Now you could watch this video as well, but if you look here, you see the epinephrine. What does it do? It increases heart rate, increases respiratory rate. And why do I need it? Because I need the energy. Because remember, I got to get the blood to where it got to go, because and I got to breathe faster to get in the oxygen in, because if a bear is chasing me, or me, I always use the example of a pit bull, because we're in Virginia, and he goes, what bear is going to chase you? But how many of your neighbors have pit bulls, right? So
ID needed.
hold up. Grab my ops bag, and inside, that little pouch, there's my wallet, and there's my ID. Huh? I'm teaching, Belle, and Mama's working. So operate. Get the card. It's on my desk, and then show the guy the ID.
Okay.
Tell them both my parents are working. Jeez, figure it out. All right. Now, you could see here where they said the word fight or flight. So we have to talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Now we're jumping the gun a little bit, because we're going to be talking about this in the weeks to come, but this is a little preview, right? So here you go. So the sympathetic nervous system, also known as the fight or flight. Now, you could sit here and try to memorize all of these. Don't. Just know that when you're in a fight, or if you're running away from that bear, certain things have to happen in order for you to run away from that bear. You're going to have dilated pupils because you need to see all avenues of escape, or you need to know where to punch the bear in the snout, right? And please don't punch a bear in the snout. As a former reformed hunter, you see a bear, you run like hell, right? And you need to run like hell because your pupils need to be dilated so you can see where you're going. Now, do you need anything that has to do with eating? No. So anything that has to do with eating will be what? Inhibited. So salivation, and any of your digestive processes will stop or pause, because who in their right mind, when they get into a fight, stops and says, hey, I need a sandwich? Nope, we don't. And your bronchi has to relax, so it opens up your lungs. Your heart rate has to go up, right? That makes sense, right? I have adrenaline, epinephrine, and noradrenaline, which is norepinephrine, because I need that sequestered energy. And here's a nice little side note. It stimulates orgasm, but the continuation of it requires the parasympathetic nervous system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in like week 8 or 9 when we talk about reproductive systems. And it inhibits bladder contraction. But you might say, well, Dr. Garais, I got so scared I almost pissed myself. Well, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, I want you to think of it like the seesaw that's constantly in balance. But if you're running scared, what happens? Don't you think that sometimes your body wants to jump to the other side to compensate? And that's why sometimes you wet yourself when you get scared. But typically, I could ask you, sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Will your pupils dilate or constrict? Dilate. Will there be any peristalsis or salivation? Nope, because You don't want to eat a sandwich while you're getting into a fight with a pit bull. And of course, your heart rate will go up, and so will your respiratory rate. Now, who's the exact opposite system? Is the parasympathetic system. So everything would be the exact opposite. Now, this is the fight or flight. This, the parasympathetic nervous system, is called feed and breed. So feed, because you get hungry. Breed, because, you get a little bit libidinous. And for those of you who don't want to use Google to look up the word libidinous, it's the word horny, the best way to put it. So you need the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system with respect to sex, right? And we'll talk more about that later. But the parasympathetic nervous system requires what? Decreased heart rate, decreased respiratory rate. That's why if you're all hyped up and nervous, that's where erectile dysfunction also comes into play, because your male patient can't get it up if they're all what? All angry and all part of the sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system, you got to be relaxed. Same thing when you go eat. Who's stressed out when they're eating? You should be what? Relatively relaxed when you eat, so that you'll stimulate saliva, stimulate peristalsis, and stimulate gastric secretion so you can go eat something. So parasympathetic, think feed or breed. Another way I put in my notes previously is a little bit more vulgar, which is hungry or horny, right? And then sympathetic is easy, fight or flight. So doesn't this look like a both? Is it A, B, C, both, D, neither, right? And you could see these are both part of your autonomic nervous system. That means you cannot control it. It is auto, self. So for example, I take cocaine, right? No matter how much I can, because I can try to control myself, what will happen to my pupils? They'll get dilated. What will happen automatically with my heart rate and my respiratory rate? It will increase, right? So though it goes, but what happens when I either smoke a whole bunch of weed or eat a whole bunch of gummies? And please don't do that. The gummies are way more harsher than anything you could ever smoke in your entire life, is what I heard, right? So what happens in the parasympathetic nervous system, right? You get relaxed, slowing heartbeat, slowing respiratory rate. And what is we all know from movies, TV, and media about eating and smoking too much weed? You get the munchies. Parasympathetic nervous system, right? And it makes sense. And you can't help it. You smoke a whole bunch of ganja, you're gonna need some Twix, or maybe I don't know, a muffin or something. Who knows? I do not know the mindset of a bunch of weed heads. But sympathetic, parasympathetic, all part of the autonomic nervous system. It is not controllable. This is all autonomic, and this happens automatically. So the sympathetic nervous system with response to stress is automatic. You cannot control whether it goes your response to stress, but what can you do? You can control your view on how you deal with stress. For example, I got stressed out today. Some coworker ticked me off, and someone stole my heater on my desk. I've been an employee for this university for 8 years. Never, no one even stole a pen or a piece of paper from my desk, and someone stole my desk heater, my 1195 desk heater. How dare they? Well, at the time, I didn't think it was funny, but I was real pissed off. So what do you got to do? You got to mitigate your stress. Oh, went to the gym, ran a couple miles, put a couple gloves on. If any of you, boxing. Wow, I go boxing like twice a week, hit the bag and do all that. It's a workout. And it's really cool because let's say your boss or a coworker or your mom's tick you off. Oh, I always picture punching my mom. I didn't say that a lot. I love my mother dearly, but oh my God, my mother gets on my last nerve sometimes. Sometimes, when I hit that bag, it's a release. And then I could go deal with my mother much, much better later in the day. So it's a release of all that energy and all that stress. And anything you could do to mitigate your stress. Like my mother, for example, her thing is she loves gardening. So at 5:30 in the morning, she's digging up plants and like randomly moving them around my backyard and my house, right? But, you know, I let her do it because it's her way of, you know, coping with stress. And it's wonderful because it helps her with her hands and her rheumatoid arthritis. You know, she crouches down and then she looks at the yard when it's really, really nice. It gives her a sense of accomplishment. So you could see these are some things that you can also do for yourself and also for your patients, because your patients, when they come to us, they need actual advice. You know, you can't tell them stuff like, hey, can't, you know, things will change, keep your head up, you know. Really? Keep your head up? That's it? Right? You got to give them actual things and also a good rationale anatomically and physiologically on why you should be working out. But for your male patient, cardiovascular, tell them about the erectile dysfunction. Male patients, they don't give a damn if their heart or their kidneys come flying out of their body. But if you tell them that their penis won't work, they will they will want to get on any meds. They will get on that treadmill lickety split. That is my experience in 6 years of internal medicine. I'm not being facetious. It's so true. So let's look at this. Oh, how'd my baby get down here? Oh, Jesus. Belle, somebody get baby. Hey, Chongits. I wish you guys could see the damage that my little one's causing. All right, let's go to autoimmune. Sorry, gang. The house is the house Garais is in a little bit disarray right now. So let's look at this autoimmune disease. And now that we know that long-term stressor, increased cortisol from your adrenal gland, will decrease my immune system. So that's one thing that how your immune system can be compromised. Now, this is another way how your immune system can be attacked, not by something from the outside, it can be from something from the inside. Let's look at this.
Your body's immune system protects you from disease and infection. But if you have an autoimmune disease, your immune system attacks healthy cells in your body by mistake. Autoimmune diseases can affect many parts of the body. No one is sure what causes autoimmune diseases. They do tend to run in families. Women, particularly African American, Hispanic American, and Native American women, have a higher risk for some autoimmune diseases. There are more than 80 types of autoimmune diseases, and some have similar symptoms. This makes it hard for your healthcare provider to know if you really have one of these diseases, and if so, which one. Getting a diagnosis can be frustrating and stressful. Often, the first symptoms are fatigue, muscle aches, and a low fever. The classic sign of an autoimmune disease is inflammation, which can cause redness, heat, pain, and swelling. The diseases may also have flare-ups, when they get worse, and remissions, when symptoms get better or disappear. Treatment depends on the disease, but in most cases one important goal is to reduce inflammation. Sometimes doctors prescribe corticosteroids or other drugs that reduce your immune response.
Okay, let's look at some salient features of this video. So one is that autoimmune is, let's see if I can go back, if I can move this back to here. Okay. One is that, if I can find it, I think it's genetic. Okay, there's a genetic disposition, and it's definitely women. I'm not quite sure if this is accurate. I have to go read up, but during my training, but my training was years ago, right? It's usually women, and if you're more heavy set, or you have genetics to be a more heavy set woman, tend to have more autoimmune disease, and it tends to attack a broad range of ages, but it gets really bad around middle age or 40s and above. And another thing about it is because it's your immune system attacking yourself, so it mimics a whole bunch of different diseases. But the one thing that is common to all autoimmune is that it messes with nonspecific frontline immune response. And what is that? That is your inflammation. So rashes, muscle fatigue, muscle aches, and what they call FUO, or fever of unknown origin. It's stuff like that. And it's very vague and it's very hard. But the one thing when we take blood from the patient, there's a lot of chemicals, which is the topic of this course, of this class today, goes that we could see that point to an inflammatory response and inflammatory reaction. And if you recall, inflammation, redness, heat. Let me go get somebody to deal with my baby. Oh. All right, sorry everybody. Nelson, hurry, get your sister now. Nelson, hurry, can you get somebody to take care of the baby, please? All right. I'm back. Sorry about that, everybody. The new normal, right? Okay, so we all know the basic signs and symptoms of inflammation: redness, heat, pain, and swelling. But typically when we do blood work, we could see certain descriptors that can lead to autoimmune. And then the very fact, if it's female and they're getting a little older, and the history of flare-ups and remissions. And I can tell you right now, the flare-ups are definitely stress related. Now, here is the ironic part of the show. In order to reduce this inflammation, I got to give you corticosteroids. Corticosteroids are chemicals that we make that mimic cortisol, right? And what we already know, what does cortisol do? It decreases inflammation, it decreases the immune response. So it's really this catch-22 where I want to reduce the inflammation, right? So that you can have less symptoms and live your life. But then what happens? You're going to be immunocompromised, and then opens up the patient for, to get even sicker. And especially now in the world of COVID, anybody on corticosteroids. Now, here's the funny part. You guys can look it up, and I might even look it up again. The funny part is some of the data that I was looking up over the summer, not a lot of immunocompromised. I thought the immunocompromised population of patients would get hit by COVID more. But now, statistically, as of last time I looked up the numbers, June and July of last year, they don't get hit as bad. Maybe it's different now. I'm going to go check it out. But I thought that was very interesting, because if you're immunocompromised, right, whether it's stress, whether you have an autoimmune disease attacking you, don't you think that should set you up for like trouble? And it should, and it would. So let us now go, let's go to our textbook, because now we want to talk about the structure of the endocrine system as a whole. And this video is really neat. And so are these notes here, if you want to look at the short course of it all when you're studying. But we're going to jump right into your textbook. And if you go here to your main course shell by clicking on this, this is called a popcorn trail of, like, just like Hansel and Gretel. So I could go here. I'm looking for chapter 17, table of contents. And then you scroll all the way down, 21. Ooh, my scroll function is very fast. So I can go here, click on that, and then I could, oh, look. For those of you who are having trouble trying to create an outline to make your, what do you call that? To make your concept map, it's right here, doesn't it? It can help you, right? So that's one way to look at it. So let's look at this. I'm afraid to click on this. Has anyone clicked on this? Because I'm afraid of updating anything. It messes with a lot of my software. Let me see. Ms. Munoz, the answer no. Oh, yeah, no. So you haven't. I thought no meaning no, I'm not here. Okay, so we already talked about that there are chemicals that signal to do stuff. And the first chemical that we talked about today was epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. And we also kind of mentioned norepinephrine as well when we saw that video. So those are hormones. And they're also they're chemical messengers. So all a hormone is a chemical messenger, and the endocrine system is a system where these hormones get released into our bloodstream, and then it tells the body to go do stuff. Now, the other messaging system in our body is the nervous system, and we're going to be talking about that like in week 6 or week 7. Now, the endocrine system is chemical. The nervous system is both chemical and electrical. That's why the nervous system is a lot faster, okay? Nervous system uses neurotransmitters, and the endocrine system uses hormones, right? Now, the endocrine system, it tends to have, the response time tends to be slower because the distance it has to travel in the bloodstream. The nervous system, since it's electrical, the distance is very fast and it's always relatively short. That's why, and I'll talk a little bit right now about, think about when's the last time you went to a buffet, right? I know it's been a while since they closed down buffets March of last year, but you know when you're at the buffet and you're already like 5 plates deep, right? It takes your endocrine system a while to tell you that, to tell your brain, hey, you've had enough to eat, right? So that's why your satiety center is controlled by your endocrine system. That's why it's better for you to eat slow, right? Because instead of eating fast, because if you eat fast, it takes a while for your brain to tell you that you're full. So you'll keep eating beyond your capacity. Right? And then what happens? Then your stomach aches, and that happens very, very quickly. But by that time, when the nervous system kicks in, it's too late. That's why one of the dieting considerations when you're asking your patient, or even when yourself is dieting, like for example, myself, I've always had a battle with my weight for the last 10 years because when I was in my 40s, even when I was in my 40s, working out every day kept my weight down. It was easy. But now you get older, your metabolism gets slower. I just look and think about food. I gain weight, a lot of weight. I think I gained like 30 pounds or something like that during this time of COVID. Yeah, it was like something like 30, 35 pounds. Because I'm not paying attention to this, right? So it's better to have a portioning system that is slow because your endocrine system takes a while to catch up, right? But your nervous system is much, much faster, okay? So when you're dieting, you got to think of your endocrine system. Because if you think about your nervous system, by the time your stomach is distended, you can't breathe, and you're feeling that pain in your gut, it's too late. You already totally overate. But the endocrine system, much slower. But the neat thing about the endocrine system is that its effects are much, much longer. Nervous system, if I poke you in the eye, well, not maybe in the eye, I poke you maybe in the chest, right? After I stop poking you, that signal goes away, right? But endocrine system, once that signal is in, it tends to stay. That's why if you eat slower, the signal to your brain, like, hey, you're full. That's why a nice strategy to have is to eat slow and eat in portions. So when I used to go to a restaurant, my cardiologist used to always tell me, cut your plate in half, eat half whatever speed you want, but then stop and then talk to everybody and and do other things or walk around. And then you realize that you didn't need to eat that whole entire plate. So those are the difference between the signaling systems in your body. Nervous system, fast. Endocrine system, slow. And these are these wonderful differences. Now, endocrine gland, of course, if you look at the word endo, means within. It's an internal system, and a gland is this sponge-like thing that, you know, either stores or creates these hormones or chemical messengers. Here are some examples. Let me make this a little bit bigger. You have your thyroid gland, and we're going to talk about all the functions in a moment. We already mentioned the adrenal gland. Your pancreas, which is big on insulin and glucagon. Your ovaries more than your uterus, but your uterus gets the effects of a lot of the hormones. And of course, the testes in the males, and the ovaries and testes are called your sexual organs, also known as your gonads. Because how do you become a female? There's chemical messages that have estrogen that tell your body, hey, be a woman. And testes, testosterone, right, in the male testes, gives a chemical messenger to give the signal that you're a man. And we're going to talk about what happens if I give one to another and the other one to another. Because all of us, whether you're male or female, have estrogen. But if you have ovaries, it increases your estrogen load. Because all of us have testosterone and estrogen. But in females, they only have a little bit, right? But in males, they got a ton, right? So, of course, the Department of Endocrinology is a subspecialty of the Department of Internal Medicine, and they are the masters and mistresses of this organ right here, pancreas, which has to deal with diabetes mellitus, which is very, very common. So know this chart, and there's also a similar chart in your Carolina notes in your task 3. And you could see the pituitary is mentioned a lot. The pituitary is called your master gland, and there's a front part, anterior, and there's a back part, posterior. And you could see that all these hormones have a function. Don't worry what kind of chemical it is, right? Know the hormone and know what it does and know where it's from. So the anterior pituitary, there's a whole bunch. So, you know, if you're doing, what do you call that? Cue cards or whatever way you're going to study, put those together, like growth hormone. Now, remember when your grandma used to tell you, you got to get some sleep. That's the only way to grow. Well, in my case, she was a liar. I was 5'4", I think, when I was in like 8th grade. I think I actually shrunk. But in theory, growth hormone, when you sleep, especially when the child sleeps, it gets released by the anterior pituitary, and it promotes body tissue and body growth. Prolactin, anterior pituitary, promotes milk. Pro means what? That you're pro or you're for. Lactate, lactin, right? Which is milk. Thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone will stimulate your thyroid hormone. And we're going to see the thyroid down here. They have T3, T4, and calcitonin. So what does T3 and T4 do? Increase your metabolic rate. Increase your heart rate, increase your respiratory rate. That's why your T3, T4, when you were a teenager, is vastly increased. That's why when I was 14, I ate 2 Big Macs a day. I didn't care. Right now, I eat half a Big Mac. I have to take a nap, right? And calcitonin, your thyroid, it reduces blood calcium levels, okay? Because remember, you have to keep your calcium in check. And the parathyroid, which is right next to the thyroid, increases your blood calcium levels. So parathyroid, increase, calcitonin, decrease. And that's all because of the lovely hormone here, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That's why if you ever have any heart problems, one of the first things I look at is your TSH, T3, and T4 levels, because it could be a thyroid problem. ACTH, from your adrenal gland, adrenocorticotropic hormone, stimulates hormone release from your adrenal cortex, hence the term cortic or cortical. Follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates gamete production, either sperm or ovum, which is an egg. That's what a follicle is. Luteinizing hormone stimulates androgen production. And androgens, andro meaning man, gen, creation of, LH deals with testosterone. LH also deals with the control of estrogen levels as well. And we're going to talk about that week 8 when we talk about ovulation and FSH and LH. But remember, right? Typically FSH, think gamete, LH, androgen for the purposes of the midterm. Now, the posterior pituitary has oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. Use your medical terminology powers. Antidiuretic means anti, against. Diuresis means urinating. So if I want to keep my water, let's say I'm walking in the desert. I want to keep my water because I'm going to get dehydrated. So your posterior pituitary starts figuring out, hey, you're going to start getting dehydrated, so I'm going to keep that urine. So ADH gets released and stimulates water reabsorption in the kidneys. The kidneys will not let go of water. It'll keep it in there. And oxytocin, for those of you who may had your pregnancy induced, or those of you who have been pregnant, what happens? Posterior, when it's time, the contractions get worse and get closer. It's because of this hormone called oxytocin. Tos, meaning contraction of your uterus, stimulates uterine contraction. That's why you have your tocodynamometer, which is that that little, it's like a Walkman type thing that they strap on your belly. Ladies, if you guys, or even gentlemen, if you guys remember your significant others when they were strapped in right before the baby came out. And maybe you remember the lovely word pit drip. Pitocin is a drug that looks just like oxytocin. So let's say, for example, baby is not coming out. I'll put a pit drip on you. We put Pitocin in your line, and what's it going to do to the urinary contraction? It's going to squeeze so that baby can be on their happy journey outside the uterus and outside the world. Aldosterone, right, increases sodium levels. And remember, wherever sodium goes, water goes. So aldosterone has a lot to do with preventing dehydration and sodium levels in your blood and how your kidneys react to your sodium level. And we're going to talk a little bit in greater detail your RAA system, which is your renin, aldosterone, angiotensin system, which deals with sodium levels, water levels, and the resultant blood pressure changes. And that's your RAA system that we're going to be talking about, aldosterone. So remember, aldosterone, think sodium levels. Also in the adrenal cortex, we already know cortisol, and that increases blood glucose levels because we already know it triggers epinephrine, which will increase my blood glucose. Glucose gets to go inside my cell. Remember the mitochondria takes the glucose and the oxygen. What will it do? Makes ATP. ATP makes your muscles go, so we can run away from that scary bear, right? Fight or flight as well, right? So your adrenal, epinephrine, cortisol, aldosterone. Pineal gland regulates sleep cycle. That's why some people take melatonin. Melatonin, it works anecdotally, meaning to say is there's no real scientific evidence right now that melatonin works, but I've got a ton of patients who swear by it, that helps them with their sleep cycle, because your pineal gland is the thing that tells you night and day. That's why if maybe you move to a different time zone, every time I go home to the Philippines, I get this really wicked jet lag where I don't know which end is up, and it's because of what? Pineal gland, melatonin. And I've tried melatonin, it kind of works. But I've got patients and family members who swear by it. Pancreas, muy importante. This is life. That's why endocrinologists are experts at diabetes, because diabetes deals with this. So typically, when you eat food, right, you need the glucose to go inside the cell, so that we already know it can go inside the mitochondria and make ATP. So we need insulin. Now, the problem is if I don't have enough insulin, or the receptor that allows the insulin to open the doors on the cell to let the glucose in, if that isn't working, then I have either diabetes mellitus type 1 or diabetes mellitus type 2. So insulin is very, very important, and it comes from your pancreas. So if you have pancreatitis, or heaven forbid you have pancreatic carcinoma, which is pancreatic cancer, Very, very poor prognosis. I've only had half a dozen patients in my short career, and all of them died within 3 months, because you could see insulin and glucagon are very important. So insulin reduces blood sugar levels by allowing the glucose to go inside the cell where it can be used. Now, glucagon, when you're in a, let's look at this. This is when part of my lecture when I talk about you're not you when you're hungry. So let's say you just haven't eaten, no food in about, I don't know, less than 12 hours. You're really hungry, but come on, you're not starving. So what does the pancreas do? The pancreas releases glucagon. Glucagon then goes to the kidney and tells the fat cells in the kidney, right? Fat cells break down to make glucose, okay? So, and that breakdown is glycolysis, and that's why your kidney is important. And that's why fat cells are also important, because we can't have too many of them, but if I don't have enough of them, in times where I'm not eating too much, I won't have anything in reserve, okay? And that's what fat cells are for. They are storage for glucose. And if I break down fat cells, I will release glucose into my blood. And then, right, then I'll have some glucose and I'll be able to function. Now, what happens, you're not you, no food for greater than 12 hours. Now, this is a starvation state. This is not good. This is why I don't like people who are like hardcore Atkins 1 or even Atkins 2 diets, because they promote some starvation states. Now what happens? The pancreas still releases glucagon, but instead of breaking down fat cells, the fat cells now break down into oh my gosh, maybe I haven't eaten in 12 hours, breaks down into oh boy, what's the chemical I'm talking about? No food, greater than 12 hours, starvation states, ketones. Maybe I'm having a ketone moment. Now, ketones are a nice temporary glucose alternative for your body when you are in a starvation state. Now, the problem is ketones are also in long-term neurotoxic. That's why you are not you when you're hungry. That's why you get very irritable, you get loopy, you forget basic things. And that's why I don't like these ketotic diets, because they're promoting what? Burning your fat cells in a starvation state, which will cause ketones. How's this? Why don't I decrease my intake of glucose, right? Don't you think that would be better? Or increase the very fact that I have to burn them, right? Which is working out. But starving yourself greater than 12 hours and putting yourself in a ketotic state, that's a good way to get into a coma, right? Because you can get things like DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. Your body will get into acidosis, abnormal condition of acid. If your body's too acidic, it won't breathe right. And oh, by the way, all the ketones floating around in your brain will not like that environment. Therefore, your brain will then go into a coma. That's what a coma is. A coma is when your brain does not like the atmosphere it's in. So it shuts down in order to protect itself. The problem is sometimes we're not able to jumpstart them back up, which is not good. We already talked about testes and ovaries. Those are your gonads, and they are deal with sperm production, and ovaries deal with the creation of, your monthly egg or ovum. And also both of them deal with secondary sexual characteristics. Now, what are primary and secondary sexual characteristics. So let's look at that real quick because they mentioned it, so I better talk about it. So your primary sexual characteristic is your genetics, right? Devoid of any politics. If you have these 2 chromosomes, you are female. If you have these 2 chromosomes, you are male. And I'm talking not politics, pure science. Okay? Now, secondary sexual characteristics. The XX chromosome will signal your gonads. And let's say if the gonad, the XX will have an increase of estrogen production. And then that will lead to breast production and, different fat distribution, just like, who's that? What's her name? Shakira? Hips don't lie, right? But if you're a guy taking estrogen, of course, you'll have breast production, fat distribution. Remember 10 years ago, that guy who had and when you get breasts as a man, it's called gynecomastia, and it is a not too common side effect of certain drugs that enhance estrogen. So secondary sexual characteristics is what does not gonads, right? So secondary sexual characteristics are like breast, fat distribution, and of course, female voice is typically, higher, and if it's male, it would be what? Different hair distribution, right? Different fat distribution, different, voice, Adam's apple, that kind of thing, right? So that's what secondary sexual characteristics are, okay? And primary sexual characteristics, I want you to think genetics. XX is female, XY is male, and the secondary. Now, what happens if I give a whole bunch of estrogen, a whole bunch of female hormones to a male? You will then have what? Female characteristics. And the same thing for if I gave a female a whole bunch of testosterone, maybe in the form of performance-enhancing drugs like steroids. That's why take a good look at the CrossFit female community. They keep on saying stuff like, oh, we're natural. That does not look natural at all. And I've been a gym rat since I was 13, so I have a lot of friends who fall into that category, and they're into CrossFit. And I'm like, oh boy. You ever see them? They have jutting of the jaw, right? The jaw gets really square, and then the back of their head, that's called nuchal prominence. It's super, super obvious that they're taking something, right? Now, hormones and hormone. Let's talk about hormones and hormone receptors. So, here's an example. You don't need to know all this GMP, cyclic AMP, ATP. I mean, ATP we have to talk about. So let's say, for example, this hormone here, do you see how it fits in the shape of this receptor? So on all cells, remember we had the glycoprotein coat on all cells, if you recall that lecture in Anatomy Physiology 1 around week 3. They not only they can open up channels, they can open up doors. So let's say, for example, this hormone here was insulin, and it goes in here and it fit in this lovely insulin receptor. And then once it fits into this insulin receptor, it's going to release energy in the form of ATP. And then the ATP is going to break down, and then what's going to happen? There's going to be a different conformation of chemicals inside here, and then what's it going to do? It's going to open up the channel, and then glucose can go inside the cell where it can be utilized. So let's look at diabetes mellitus type 1 and diabetes mellitus type 2. Diabetes mellitus type 1 is insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. So I won't be able to get glucose inside my cell if this insulin right here is broken. Let's say this thing turned into a circle, or there's not enough triangles. then I won't get a signal for the glucose to go in. And then where would the glucose be? It'll be floating around everywhere except where it needs to be, inside the cell. Now, what's diabetes mellitus type 2? In order for the door to open so that glucose can goes in, it has to have a receptor. So if the receptor is broken, so think of it like a lock, which is the receptor, and a key, which is like the hormone. So in diabetes mellitus type 2, the lock is broken. And by the way, you can get diabetes mellitus type 2. Let's say you're like me and all you do is eat Doritos and drink beer. You will abuse this system right here, right? So what will happen by the time you get 50? This gets broken, and then this is broken. Can glucose go into the cell? Nope. So that is diabetes mellitus type 2. So in conclusion, diabetes mellitus type 2, think what? Receptor problem. Diabetes mellitus type 1, think an insulin problem. So if you have diabetes mellitus type 1, you're going to need insulin. If you have diabetes mellitus type 2, you don't necessarily need insulin. And remember I told you guys there are other receptors, there are other ways for glucose to get in here, right? There's something called your GLUT2, GLUT3 proteins. When you work out, the doors for glucose automatically open up. And that's why it's really awesome. If you work out regularly, your metabolism is increased up to 45 minutes after your workout. So just imagine 45 minutes after your workout, and then you go eat dinner, or you eat lunch, or whenever you do your workout, it's like you didn't eat at all because you took all that energy and you burned it all. Now, there's a regulation to this system, and that is the same thing that we talked about when we were talking about homeostasis. So you have a positive and negative feedback, and the best way to look at it is the negative feedback loop tells it to slow down. The positive feedback loop goes, hey, it didn't fix yet, it's got to speed back up, right? So negative feedback loop, what's it going to do? Like, for example, you already got away from the pit bull. You got to slow everything down. So your body is going to tell the system to go, hey, slow it down. We don't need fight or flight anymore. We're done, right? Or the positive feedback loop will be we need more. It goes, the pit bull's still on our heels. We need to keep on going. So that's the best way to look at negative and positive feedback loops. They are self-correcting systems, and it's based on, the homeostasis model that we showed you in Anatomy and Physiology Type 1. So let's see what else we have here. Oh, here is the location of your thalamus, hypothalamus, and your pituitary, anterior and posterior pituitary. Our endocrine system is so important. Whatever Mayan aliens created us, look where they put it. They put it in the base of the brain where it's nice and protected. And this is just another a chart that shows the other chart that we showed before, right? And you could see how, and there's greater explanations for all these hormones here. But like I said, the chart is like quicker. That's why I like, I like scanning through textbooks, because there's things that can get to you quicker. Here's the view of your, this is your thyroid gland. Let's see if they could show us the parathyroid gland. And you could see how it's right there in your neck, and it's well associated with your cardiovascular system here, as you can see here from these 4 sets of arteries you have here. Let's see, anything? Oh, this is a goiter when there's when there's issues with your thyroid. And we already talked about calcitonin, T3, T4. The rest of the chapter is like this. It just has more pictures and expands on things. Okay, I think we're good. So let me close this out, and let's look at our objectives to see if, did we meet everything? So let's look at task 3, which is due next week. Did we talk about hormones and their function? We talked about chemical signaling and the structure and how this endocrine system and where our glands are located and all that jazz? Yep, we did. So I think we're good. Did we talk about long and short-term stress? Yep. Fight or flight, your autonomic nervous system? Yep. So what's due next week? Task 3. Let's look at the discussion. Maybe I can give you some hints. The majority of you, you're on the ball regarding discussions. Dietary antioxidants have been found to preserve the size of the thymus. First, you gotta, in your introduction, is that true? First say, is it true or false? And of course, have a citation for it. So improving immunity, that decreases with age. Is that true? Why is it? Right? Why is that true? And what is the role of the thymus? Because actually, you should already know that answer if you took anatomy and physiology. But many of you are going, we didn't talk about thymus. How's this? T cells? We had a lecture on it, I think week 2, week 3 of anatomy and physiology 1. So go back and look at this. So you could see here, don't take it just because someone wrote it. Ask, do antioxidants really work? Like if I take a whole bunch of selenium, right? Do you think that'll make my thymus better? Right? And does immunity actually decrease with age? That's one way to depress me, right? So I'm already in middle age. Enough things depress me already. Just kidding. Nothing depresses me. We live here in the land of plenty. If you're depressed, you're really selfish, in my opinion. Endocrine lab, it's the same thing, has the same notes, as you can see here. Okay. And application assignment, let's click on that. Download case. Again, talking about this girl. I'm not quite sure if this girl Cassie took drugs or not. It has been a while since I read this, but read part 1, answers question 1 and 2. Read part 2, answers questions 1 through 6. Read part 3, answers question 1 and 2. And that should be good enough. Answers the questions in part 1, 2, and 3, and just read part 4. Okay, so all of that is due next week. And what's due this week? All week 2 things. And it's at this point of the show. Let me take attendance just to be sure. Okay. All right. Let me physically write it down this time. Now, pay attention to your attendance and your grades because I'm human. I could be wrong. I could have messed up. But if I messed up on your side, gave you an A when you deserved a 0, keep it to yourself. Merry Christmas. But if I gave you a 0 when you deserve an A, of course, say something so it can be logged. Give me a minute to quickly write all these names down and count. Okay, so we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? 13. Oh, that's right. And the number 13 is me. So it's good. All attendance present and accounted for. So it is at this point I am going to stop the recording.